welcome back to the Ramble podcast. I'm Rayanne, as per usual, and today we're going to be talking about body image, beauty standards, and, body standards, stuff like that. Hunter's not with us today. That sounds gruesome. Today we have our sister, actually.
Hi, I'm Sierralyn. When Hunter and Rayanne talk about their sister on here, that is me. I'm 23, and I'm here today to talk with Rayanne.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. I have a huge list of notes. We're going to collect our thoughts for a second, and then we're going to get into the first topic. Body image and beauty standards weigh heavily in both of our lives, I feel like. I don't know if you agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I know, it affects me a lot. I've always struggled with comparisons, comparing myself to other body types and other people specifically. And figures and things like that. I struggled with, and still kind of struggle with, eating disorder in multiple different ways. And body image is a main reason for that for me, because it's always, without getting too in depth, because I don't want to trigger anyone, there'll be a trigger warning on this podcast and episode anyway. But, body image is really what causes and triggers things for me, and causes my actions for my eating disorder and things like that.
And throughout middle school, body image and comparison was a big issue for me. And then I did go through treatment for anorexia nervosa in 2015. And so since then I've just been, in recovery. I don't really like to say that I'm recovered, because it's an ongoing process that you have to deal with every day of your life.
I agree with that. That's why I said too, I still kind of struggle with it every now and then. I kind of struggled with earlier on orthorexia, which is basically health obsession. And then I was a severely low weight, and then I struggled with binging from after restricting my food. I'm only going in depth because, like I said, there will be a trigger warning on this episode, so if anyone does not want to hear this, they should not be listening. But I won't go into numbers or anything like that throughout the entire episode, just in case anyone wants to know. Body image for me, since I was homeschooled for most of my life, except for 4th and 5th grade, was mainly throughout social media, and since I watch wrestling, consistently, I'm sure, religiously, really. Anyone who listens probably knows that, but it's even hard for me to watch sometimes because of the figures of most of the women that wrestle. I usually don't compare myself to men's bodies, but because I'm a woman, but seeing them really affects me sometimes, and that can even be triggering, so, it's hard because it's something that I love so much, but it can still trigger me. It really just depends on how I'm feeling that day, and it bums me out, but it's it just shows that even in something you love, there can always be negatives, and that body image can always show up, and societal standards can always show up and affect you.
I think it's also interesting when you look at wrestling, and it's interesting and sad that with a lot of the smaller female wrestlers, they're viewed as, they're so attractive, they're so gorgeous, and with the larger or average-sized female wrestlers, the commentators and the people who run the company, push them as being, these monster of a woman, they're a powerhouse, which it's great to celebrate their strength, but it's also... It would also be nice to see that they are beautiful too, and they're not just, kind of comparing them, saying they're like men almost, and being strong. That's why I like Nikita Lyons, who's in NXT right now, because they say that she's super strong and that she's beautiful, and she is more... She is someone who's closer to my body type, I think, than most of the women's roster.
Mm-hmm. Even as an example, for Otis, they literally call him a tree trunk because he's, larger as a guy. And I'm like, what are you doing? If he's fine with it, fine. But it just seems like it's not even seems like, they consistently do this with all of their larger competitors and superstars. And it's really bothersome. And it definitely, I think, could play a part on how people growing up could, like, be affected by that. Or even adults could be affected by that, being like, well, like, a woman who looks like Dewdrop or Nia Jax when she was around, and they, like, act like she's this monster, like you said.
Right.
It's like women could be, like, could degrade themselves for that because, like, they think that they're hideous or intimidating and things like that, and they don't need to be perceived that way if they're not. I mean, sure, people can be intimidating, but just because of their size, they shouldn't have that put on them.
Right.
Another thing that I struggle with seeing online is body comparison, like, still on the topic of body comparison, is when you see these people who preach about their eating disorder, like, to share their story, and so other people can, relate to them if they have to, just to know they're not alone and everything like that. But I feel like sometimes it's hard for me to read their stories, and they're all, like, recovered and everything, when they're still, like, super skinny. It's hard for me to see. Not that it's their fault, they're not doing anything wrong by sharing their stories, but for me, it can still be triggering because I'm like, well, I'm either recovered or I'm still going through treatment, or not necessarily treatment, but, like, still taking care of myself and working through it and things like that. But I don't look like you, and I never looked like you even before I had this disorder or had these issues or anything like that. And so it's hard for me and then you have these people who recover from eating disorders or are, like, they label themselves as recovery. Like Sierra said, it's an ongoing thing that pretty much lives with you the rest of your life, but they usually label it as, like, I've recovered from an eating disorder. They preach fitness after they're recovered and everything like that. And not saying it doesn't work for them, but I feel like sometimes, like, I worry about them.
Right.
Because I know I struggle with over-exercising, so it can be a scary slope. Pardon me. And sometimes I worry that they're sharing that message and that could be harming other people. So it's just kind of ties into, like, body comparison and social media being a trap sometimes. Social media can definitely help because there were quite a few creators I watched when I was more in depth of my eating disorder who were going through treatment or who were recovering or who had gone through it and were sharing their story, and it definitely helped me to connect with someone when I was too afraid to talk to other people. But at the same point, I feel like other people sometimes either take it the wrong way, or sometimes there have even been creators I've seen or influencers who kind of abuse the power they have and share, like, hey, I'm recovered from an eating disorder, or I'm recovering from an eating disorder, and I'm selling skinny tea or laxatives and things like that, and that can be super triggering and not helpful at all.
Right. And I just also wanted to say that all kinds of people can have eating disorders, and there are so many other different kinds of eating disorders, but we are both straight-sized women, pretty average-sized women.
Right.
And so we're speaking on that we're speaking through that lens, but, you can be overweight, quote-unquote, and have an eating disorder, and you don't, there are so many, you can be a male and have an eating disorder.
Absolutely.
There are so many different types, but we can only speak for our own experiences.
Right.
So that's important to note.
And when I say, like, oh, someone is skinnier than me and I'm comparing myself to them, and oh no, I don't look like them, that doesn't mean that you have to look like them. That's something in my brain that's telling me I'm not good enough if I don't look like them. But if you're not, like, a size 0 or a size 2 or anything, that doesn't mean you're not good enough. I love everyone of every shape and size, and everyone of every shape and size is worthy. I realized that I should have said that sooner so I'm not coming off as, like, toxic. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the way my eating disorder works and my brain works, is telling me that, like, oh, if I was skinnier, I'd be better. But obviously that's not the truth, and I know that. It's just hard for me to believe it for myself personally.
Right. It's very much a this is true for me but not true for everyone else mindset, like, that comes along with it. Like, if I struggle with the idea of, like, oh, like, this terrifying, like, fear of being fat. I know, like, fat people, there's nothing wrong with people who are fat, and you can be fat and healthy. I'm one of the, like, the number one people, I know who, like, preaches that.
Exactly.
But, like, in my mind, it's just one of the things that, like, society has ingrained in us that it's not okay to be. So, like, you know, still constantly fighting those thoughts and trying to reframe those thoughts and just, you know, overcome them.
Body comparisons are so toxic, too, because you can literally eat the same, work out the same, or not work out at all, or anything like that. Basically, you can have the same lifestyle as someone else, and they could still be a completely different size as you.
Right.
This photographer I follow on Instagram called The Eyes of My Lens, posted a reel about her and her sister, and they were like, she was like, we grew up the same, ate the same food, had pretty much the same activity level and everything like that, and I'm a size ABC and she's a size XYZ, you know what I mean? Like, very different sizes. It doesn't matter, because, like, everyone's body is simply just different. Everyone has different medical issues, everyone's just has different genetics, everything like that. So body comparisons are just simply not realistic.
Right.
And now I think we want to touch more on exercising and people's relationships with anxiety. Nope, that's something else I struggle with. But exercise in recovery, or, you know, like, quote-unquote after recovery, like when you're more healthy and everything like that. But, like, of course, Sierra said as well, you can still struggle with it throughout the rest of your life.
Right. Like, when I was fresh out of treatment for my eating disorder, around that time I worked at a fitness facility. I'm not going to say the place, but I worked at a fitness facility. I worked in the childcare area, luckily, so it wasn't like I worked with the fitness equipment where that might have been triggering. But with my employment there, I got a free membership. And one of the things that was helpful to me during that time was I started attending a Zumba class that was run by somebody else who works there, and it was really fun for me. It was a great way for me to incorporate exercise back into my life in a way that was fun and didn't feel forced like it was when I was in the depths of my eating disorder.
This is kind of off topic, and we will get back on topic, but I just thought of it now. It's also important to note that, like, you kind of said that before, but everyone's eating disorder is different. And I mentioned that because I never really got treatment for my eating disorder. I attended therapy, and I went to, like, gastroenterologist doctors and stuff like that, because I was having a lot of stomach pains and different problems there, there was an underlying IBS diagnosis, and things like that. So I did go to doctors, but I was never really in treatment for specifically my eating disorder. And I find myself belittling myself for that a lot, because, again, the comparison game, even when I was, like, more sick, or more in the depths of my eating disorder, I would compare myself to my sister, because, like, she said she went to treatment for it, and I never really did that. So I kind of always felt like, oh, I'm not sick enough, which is something that I know a lot of people with eating disorders struggle with. They never think they're sick enough, so they never want to get help. But no matter how much you're struggling, it's always valid to seek help, and whether it's therapy or doctors or talking to your friends about it, because then they can help you through it. But it's always good to tell, like, your parents or your grandparents or your guardian. And doctors and everything like that. Be honest with your therapists, be honest with your doctors, because your mind is jaded when you're sick. You might not realize how much you're struggling, because your mind is jaded with all these negative and intrusive and badly interpreted thoughts. So it's always good to reach out to someone when you think something's wrong, and just be honest with how you're feeling and everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting that you say that you felt like you weren't sick enough because you didn't go to, you know, treatment full out like I did, because in the past I've, like, looked at you and I've been like, oh, she didn't have to go to treatment, like, And I've kind of almost felt lesser for that. And that was a big thing that I had to deal with when I went into treatment, because you and Hunter were so young. It was 2015, so you were...
It's like 13.
Like 13, and Hunter was 9. So, and to see your sister like that, and then I was in treatment, I was in the hospital for 10 days and then in a treatment facility for a month where I lived there. So that was really traumatizing for them as well, and I felt guilty for that for a long time. And that was something that I had to work through as well. Because there's no reason to feel guilty for it, because it was what I needed, and you guys were young, but even then you understood that it was something that I needed to do to get better.
Was it really only a month? It felt like looking back, it feels like so much longer.
It was
not only like, oh, you didn't do enough,
right.
But like, it seemed like so much longer. I think it was worse too. I beat myself up over it because you were cities away, and I get motion sick really bad, or at least I got it worse then. And one time, I think I visited you twice, because the first time I went, I was fine, but the second time I went, I puked all over, and we had a guest with us, we had a family friend with us, and I puked all over myself.
And he felt so bad.
It was terrible. So then I didn't really go to visit you anymore, and I guess maybe because I wasn't seeing you, it felt like so much longer,
probably.
Too. Because it really, I know you said the 10 days too, but it felt like so much more than a month.
Right. It was probably the stress of it too, and I had limited screen time, so it wasn't like I could talk to you guys constantly while I was there.
Right. And it's interesting that you say that too about me getting through it without treatment and stuff like that, and I just never would have thought that you would have seen it like that, because in my mind, I don't know. I guess I just never would have thought you had seen it like that it was, like, weak of you to go to treatment or anything like that, or because I thought that was brave, because I never did that, and I just, even then, before I got my eating disorder or anything like that, or had, like, symptoms of it or anything, I still thought it was so brave of you for what you were doing, because that it seems like such a scary situation. And I don't know, I just thought that was really brave, and I never did it.
It was that, and it was also, like, being worried that you would feel the way that you just said that you feel, and, like, you know, like you weren't sick enough, which, yeah, like she said, is super common, and it's something that, you know, people shouldn't feel, because you don't need to lose a certain amount of weight or have certain symptoms to be sick enough. There is no sick enough, there's just, you know, being sick.
Yeah. I realized recently that I struggle with exercise still, in the way that I get into a good groove with it. I'll exercise every day or every other day, in whatever way makes me feel good, and I break a sweat and stuff like that. And then I miss 2 days of exercising, and then boom, I need like dozens of motivation to start exercising again, because I just fall into this rut of like, oh man, I can't do it, blah, 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 and then, it reminds me of when I was super duper everyday exercising, multiple times a day, though, and I don't know, it's just, it still messes with my mind, in a way. I don't really know how to explain it, but it just, I feel the pressure. That's what it is. I feel when I'm not exercising, I feel so much pressure to exercise, like I have to. Mm-hmm. And if I don't, then I'm not good enough. In my head, of course. I know it's not true, but that's what my mind tells me. And I enjoy exercising, but sometimes it just feels like so much of a chore. And if I genuinely don't want to, then I shouldn't have to force myself to, because that's when it gets toxic, when you absolutely force yourself to do things that you don't feel up to doing, whether it be energy or motivation-wise or just mental health-wise. Don't force yourself to do things just because you feel like you need to, because you need to look a certain way, or because you're wrong for not exercising.
Right. And don't get me wrong, it was absolutely not directly after treatment when I started exercising. It took a long time, like months and months. And honestly, since then, I've been very much like in a rut about exercising and just haven't even really touched it because it was just so hard for me to find something that to do that wouldn't be incredibly triggering for me, and also the financial aspect of paying for a gym and, not knowing if I would feel up to actually going to the gym and not wanting to waste the money on it if I wasn't going to utilize it, because I've done that too. So there are a couple things that I like to keep in mind now when I'm exercising, and that's one of them is modifying things in the workout. I watch YouTube videos where there are like dance workouts or walking workouts and things like that for me to go along to, so I feel like there's some kind of guidance to it, but without me needing to obsessively create a workout plan for myself. So modifying parts of the workout, doing things that are fun. I try to do that, and that's another reason why I like doing those, because they're fun and it feels like there's somebody doing it alongside you who very much looks like she's having a good time. I like to use Grow with Joe on YouTube. I like to watch her videos. I think they're awesome, and I don't think she's at all triggering for me. I think she talks about how her workouts can help you lose weight, but she doesn't shove it down your throat at all. She has a very organized channel. And anyway, and also making sure that you don't decide what you're going to eat that day based on whether or not you exercise or how much you exercise.
That's a very good one.
And the last one that I'm thinking of is remembering that you don't have to like kill yourself for every workout. Like when I first started doing those videos or walking on this treadmill that we got from my boyfriend's mom, I was like, oh, I have to do like, it for X amount of time or else, what's the point? But then specifically Joe has workouts that are like 12 minutes or 15 minutes, and I've gotten myself accustomed to the fact that, hey, it's okay if I do one of those. And, like, I don't have to do it for a super long amount of time. I don't have to be dripping sweat when I'm done. It's just, enough to get your body moving and to get you feeling good. And also, I don't exercise every day. And that's something that, like, you just find your own groove and what works for you and your schedule and what makes you feel, like, happy with yourself. I usually work out, like, 3 days a week. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It depends on, what the schedule is.
I think it's good that you say it depends, too, because people who have, like, super strict workout schedules, like, if that's your thing and it works for you, awesome. But it doesn't work for everyone. And because for me, if I make myself a schedule that's like, I have to work out at least 5 times a week and this is a workout I have to do. And if I don't stick to that, I'm beating the shit up out of myself because I didn't do, quote unquote, good enough. You know what I mean? So I kind of just go day by day. Like, when I started working out again not too long ago, I did a really hard workout for, like, 45 minutes, something like that, whatever, just because I wanted to. I didn't even realize it had been that long. And then the next day, I was super sore. I really wanted to work out again, but my body was telling me that it needed time to rest. And I think that's really important, too. Listen to your body. If your body is sore, don't push it too hard. Like, it's always good to push yourself, but if you're in, like, pain sore,
right,
don't push yourself because your body is telling you it needs time to rest. And the same thing with your mind. If you are pushing yourself too hard to the point where it's making you anxious or depressed or angry or sick or frustrated, don't make yourself work out if you don't want to. Or just in general, don't push yourself to do things that is negatively affecting you. Like I said, it's always good to push yourself to do things that are scary and stuff like that. But if it's to the point where, like, you're unbearably freaking out about it or just, like, unmotivated or unenergized to do it, then let yourself take a break, take a breath, and calm down and just go with the flow. And also, like what Sierra said about how long you work out for, it really doesn't matter. People put too much stress on, like, I have to work out for 30 minutes or I have to work out for X amount of time, whatever. And I mean, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, it's still moving your body. And if it's making you feel good, that's awesome. It doesn't matter how long you do it for, it's better than not doing it at all if it's making you feel good. You know what I mean?
Right.
Going back to what you said earlier, too, about like when we were talking about working out and stuff like that, and having to like plan out what you're eating around your exercising and stuff like that. Food can be so toxic in the whole relationship with body image and everything like that because, like I mentioned before too, you can eat the same thing as somebody else and you're just not going to look the same as them because everyone's metabolism is completely different and their genetics are completely different and everything like that. And even though you know that, you still try to eat exactly like someone else or eat less or something like that to try and look like someone and or feel better about yourself and reward yourself for like eating less food. And it can be such a runaround and so toxic and harmful, as well as in society or certain communities on social media and stuff like that. You are literally like praised or pushed to eat less or eat a certain way and things like that, and it's just not realistic. Just like there's a lyric in this song by Jax called Victoria's Secret that says the fucking pressure I was under to lose my appetite, and it's just like so true, and it's like ridiculous how accurate that song can be. You should definitely give it a listen. That part is so healing to just scream, I feel like, because how true it is and how accurate like the feeling is and everything, because you're put under so much pressure to eat less and things like that so that you'll lose weight and you'll quote unquote look better and stuff like that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So food can be such a trigger and so detrimental in your life, honestly, I feel like.
Right, and people don't realize a lot of the time unless you develop a disordered relationship with food, how much like the social impact that food has sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes, you'll have this idea of what you're going to eat for the day, but then all of a sudden your boyfriend or your friends are like, hey, let's go out and grab some ice cream or something, just like spontaneously, and that's just like thrown in your face, and you have to like deal with it in the moment and try not to freak out about it because it's not something that you had planned.
It used to happen to me all the time. I'd try and make a meal plan for the day or something like that, and my parents would be like, hey, you want to go get milkshakes or something like that? And I would freak out. There was like this especially trigger warning on this part for food and restrictive eating and everything. There was one time years ago when we were gonna go out somewhere and I literally just didn't eat all day until we left at like 3 o'clock because I knew we were gonna be having like dessert or something like that, and it was so in my brain that I wasn't allowed to eat anything else until I had that, and like because I was having that rather. It's so controlling, and it's scary how much it like you have to rely on food. Like Ethan Klein said too, he was like, it's hard being like either feeling addicted to food or having just disordered relationships with food because like it's hard to hide. Mm-hmm. Because if you like eating is such a social thing too, and it can reflect on your body sometimes, like how you appear, whether you gain weight from it or lose weight from food or whatever it can be. But again, it's just a social thing too, and people can see the anxiety in your eyes sometimes when food is mentioned, and it's not something that's easy to hide because it's so out there and you have to live with it every day. You have to eat. It's not something, I don't know, not going to compare it to anything else, but like it's not something easy to hide.
Right. And I'm going to preface this with saying I have never struggled with addiction before, but from what I've seen from other people dealing with it, I have like compared having an eating disorder to kind of an addiction. You're, addicted to the feeling that either, that your eating disorder gives you, whatever behaviors that means that you engage in. And one of the things that I remember that really sticks with me from treatment was when I was about to be discharged. I was talking to one of the residential counselors, and I said to her, the difference between this and, you know, alcoholism and drug addiction, like, I'm not belittling those experiences, but with those, it's just don't drink or don't do drugs.
Yeah.
And then you can be fine with it. You can't just not eat, and that doesn't solve your eating problem. In fact, it makes it worse.
Right.
Like, you can't just stay away from food and just, be abstinent from it, if that word works in this situation. And she said, yeah, that's one of the toughest parts, because you have to face your quote-unquote addiction every single day. You can't just avoid it.
And there's no medication that really treats eating disorders or anything like that either. Like, as if it was, if it was a mental illness or something like that, not belittling those either, but there's medication that can help treat those. With eating disorders, there's not a pill to make the fear of food go away, or to make you gain weight if you're underweight, or just to make your mind be at a healthy place where it's not so toxic and taxing on you every single day.
Right. It's just constant rewiring of your brain and just constant work.
Like, facing your fear. Like, I've heard a lot of phrases like face the fear and do it anyway, or opposite actions and stuff like that. That help, but again, like you said, it's just you have to rewire your brain yourself.
Right.
And you have to deal with, if like you struggled with restricting, sometimes your stomach can literally shrink. So while you're eating to try and get back to a healthy weight, whatever that is for you, it's different for everybody. You literally have to eat so much just to where your stomach is hurting, because your stomach had like shrunk because of the restriction of food. And so there's physical pain that comes with it too. It's not all like mental illness and pain and everything.
Mm-hmm. And so much of it is just like, I feel like at the beginning of recovery, at least for me and a couple of the people I was in treatment with, is that stage of recovery where you're just like kind of mindlessly eating. If you struggled with eating, just like you're not even focusing on if you enjoy it or not, because your brain won't allow you to do that. So you just, go through and you eat something. In treatment, we would make sure we had dinner conversations and, meal conversations to try and distract us from the fact that we were eating. Or if you're at home and doing it, then you could like watch TV while you eat. And that would be something that might help you take your mind off of it so that it's not so emotionally taxing while you're doing it.
I struggled with that because honestly, I would distract myself from the food that I'm eating, but then I would beat myself up later on because I'd be like, oh, I don't even remember what I ate. Mm-hmm. So like, what was the point of eating it?
Right.
So it's such like a back and forth, and like whatever works for you kind of thing.
Right.
There's so many different methods, which is great because there's been a lot of research done and a lot of work done to help like for treatment for people with eating disorders and everything. And like I said, some things work differently for different people. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and more research and more treatment that can always be there for resources that can always be there for people struggling with eating disorders and everything. But I think there's a good amount out there, at least resources, to help people. And there's a lot of different ones. I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself, but I don't know how to say what I'm saying. There's just a lot of versatile things. So if one thing doesn't work for you, there's probably something else that could, is what I'm trying to say. And with the food, like we were talking about, like that's something you have to face every day. You can't just stop eating. It doesn't help.
Right.
Obviously. Cooking in recovery is really hard. Especially, like, I really enjoy cooking, and it became difficult for me because I had to incorporate things that I was scared of incorporating before. And, like, I had to consciously use them. Like, if you were scared of one food, like, trigger warning, food mention, but if you were scared of, like, butter, like, you actively have to try and use that fear food so that it's no longer a fear food anymore. And it's really hard to do that. Like, you can have someone else cook for you, which is also super helpful if you don't have, like, the mental stability to do it for yourself, because that can be so hard to do. Not saying it makes it easier if you're not doing it for yourself, but in ways it might for certain people, because then you don't know what's in it, and you just have to eat it and just go along with what it is. So in a way, it could be easier for people, but again, it's different for everyone. But as for someone who loves to cook and kind of always cooked my own stuff, I had to be very aware of what I was eating, and it was very difficult, and it's something that you have to struggle with every single day. It's not something that goes away very easily, But over time, you use opposite action, and you just kind of keep facing the fear, and you work through it, and you're still gonna have off days, but it gets easier.
And I still struggle with, like, portion sizes, too. Like, what is inadequate portion size? Or, like, grabbing seconds sometimes stresses me out. But I definitely utilize this, like, delay, distract, decide, which is, like, another thing that I was taught in treatment, which is, like, tell yourself you're going to stress about it later. And then later, tell yourself you're going to stress about it later again. And just keep delaying it so that you never end up stressing out about it. And it sounds dumb, but it actually works sometimes, you know. It doesn't work for everybody. And if you're in a certain mental state, it might not work. Like, earlier in my recovery, that didn't really work for me. Mm-hmm. But now, at where I am right now, it works pretty well.
I know this was definitely more of a heavier episode than we usually do here at the Ramble On podcast. But it's always important to sprinkle in some good topics, whether they be controversial or scary to tackle or not. And like Sierra just mentioned to me, like, if you want to say it.
We're not professionals, again, and take everything we say with a grain of salt, because we are speaking from a privileged standpoint where we're, you know, white females who are, you know, straight size, who have struggled with eating disorders.
And we were both privileged as well in the form of having access to treatment, and whether it be therapy or
residential treatment like I had.
Yeah, no matter what it was, we both had privileged access to access to that kind of stuff. And thank you for listening. Like Sierra said, it's our experiences. Everyone's experience is going to be different, and everyone's experience is completely valid. All bodies of shapes and size and color and everything is absolutely beautiful just the way you are. Thank you for listening. We'll probably do more episodes like this. If there's heavy topics you want us to tackle, whether it be me and my sister, me and my brother, me and someone else, let us know.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me.
So happy to have you. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a trooper and sticking with us throughout. The next episode will be a bit lighter, but like I said, I'm glad that we've had this talk. It's really important to share this kind of stuff so no one feels alone.
Right.
Thank you. Tune in next week. Stay safe, everyone.